Hey guys, this is Brian with Westcott Woodworks. Today I've got a video to show you how to make some door frames and then cut out the panels to do some shaker style doors. So I'll show you how to cut out those panels, and then this one here is not put together yet, but I'll show you how to cut out these rails as well as the stiles. On the router table we're going to be using Freud's adjustable rail and stile router bit set. It's fully adjustable, so you can adjust it to a lot of different size doors to cut this tenon and then cut the groove on the inside, cut this tenon here. So we'll be using that. Now this one's specifically set up or made for shaker style doors, so if you're going to do raised panel you'd have to get a different set. But it works the same, it's just a different profile that it cuts. So we're going to get started here. Alright, I've got my bit installed here on the table. This is the one to cut all the grooves. What I'm not showing you in this video is that I've spent time with both this bit here and with the one that cuts the tenons, adding spacers, taking away spacers, to get the size right on that bit so that it matches the material that I'm going to be using for my door panels. So what I'm going to do is cut this test piece now that I've got it all set up, make sure that everything's lined up the way that I want, and then if it's set up how I want, I'm going to run all of my material for my rails and stiles and set this piece aside. I just like having smaller test pieces so that when I put the other bit on, I can just use another small piece and match it up easy. I don't have to work with the big long 8-10 foot boards. So anyway, we'll run this, make sure it works, and if it works out, we'll run the rest of our material for the doors. Once the test piece is accurate, you can proceed to mill the rest of the boards for your cabinet doors. Your router speed will depend on how much material you're removing at a time, as well as how hard the material is. I'm using soft maple here, and I'm running between 22 and 23,000 RPMs. I've got my next bit installed here. This is the one that cuts the tenon on all of these pieces. And again, I don't want you to be deceived. I've spent some time again with this bit, just like I did with the last one, setting it up so that it's going to come out right. So I got a test piece here. I'm going to go ahead and run it, make sure it fits good with my test piece from the other stuff I ran just a little bit ago, and make sure it fits before I start cutting all these and doing them. Now, when we cut this tenon, we are going to be cutting it on the end grain going across. I wouldn't recommend ever trying to do it, free-handed. That's going to be pretty dangerous. If it catches, it could kick back on you. So there's a couple things you can do if you've got a miter or a router table like this that's got the miter gauge slot. You can use that to go through there, or if you got a piece of scrap plywood, you can use that just to give it something solid to go behind as you route this out. So we're going to go ahead and test it and see what it looks like and what it fits in there. Alright, now we're going to see how we did with our fitting all these together. So I've got my first test piece. This is the one I just ran. So we'll see. They do fit in there. It's a little snug, but that's what I want, so that they'll fit in there nice and good. Now you can see down there, that's a tight joint. It looks a little bit off. That's just because these aren't, you can see they're not lined up perfect there. But so that's exactly what I want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and get the measurements for my doors that I need to make and cut all these pieces to the right size. Alright, the first door that I've got to do is actually a 14.5 by 22.5. And obviously you can see I went ahead and cut it out and just dry fit it together. You've got, just to explain some of the terminology, you've got the stiles, they go up and down here, and the rails go left to right. So with that being said, 22.5 by 14.5, when you cut these out, your stiles go from the very bottom to the very top, the full distance. So I cut these right at 22.5. Some people cut them long and they'll trim it later. I feel like if I can just cut it right the first time, then that saves me a step later on. But if you're worried about not cutting them right, cut them a little long, and then you can just trim off the ends at a later time. Now when it gets to the rails, my total width is 14.5, so 14.5 goes from this outside edge to this outside edge. Well, you have to account for a couple of things. One, you've got two stiles on each side that are 2¼ inches thick, so that's 4.5 inches total width that you've got to subtract from this. Then you also have to account for, let me just take this apart here real quick. You've got to account for the little tenon here on the rail. This tenon sticks out 7/16 of an inch on both sides, so that's total is 7/8. So when you go to cut this 14.5, I'm going to subtract 4.5 for the width of these two rails, which will be 10 inches, and then I'm going to add to the width of it, because I want to account for these two tenons, 7/8 of an inch. So it would be 10 and 7/8. So that's what I cut this piece to, and then I milled the edges here. So I'll show you how to do one step by step, but that was just kind of to explain the overall picture of what we're going to be doing. Alright, I want to show you guys a quick tip on how to account for all this adding and subtracting materials to account for your tenons and your rails here. So this next door I'm going to make is 13¾ by 24 inches tall. So I went ahead and cut the two stiles so you can see them. They're 24 inches. What I do, take my tape measure out. I want them to finish at 13¾ so I'll go ahead and put that right on 13¾ come down here, and it is at 9¼ so that means that will account for the difference in the stiles that I've got to subtract. So that's 9¼ and then you got to remember to add for the tenon. Well, I know it's 7/16 for both tenons, which is 7/8 when you add them together. What I do is I'll just add an inch, so 9¼ would be 10¼ and then subtract the 1/8 inch to account for the material. I just try and speed up this process. Sometimes doors can be tedious and take a while. Now you want to go slow, take your time and get it right, but if there's any way I can cut and save some time, I want to do that. So that's just a quick tip on how to save a little bit of time accounting for all these measurements. Once you have cut the rails to the proper length, don't forget to account for, again, the width of the stile as well as the tenon. You can go ahead and mill the ends of the rails. Now that I've got all those face frames done, I got to cut out the panels to go on the inside. To do that, I'm going to be using this track saw here and a Freud blade that's meant for ripping plywoods, melamines, and it also does great for finish work, so there won't be any tear out. Now I am using MDF because it's a little cheaper, and it's just for shaker style cabinets, so I don't need anything real fancy. It's going to be painted anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out all the pieces on here, and then we'll go back inside and I'll show you how to install them. For the sake of time of this video, I'm only showing the one cut. Just make sure you do cut both your length and width to the right measurement to cut out these insert panels. Now that you've got all your rails and stiles cut, and you've got all your panels cut to go inside, you can start the assembly. Now I'd recommend dry fitting them all first, like I did with this one, before you start putting nail and glue in things. Otherwise it's going to be a lot more difficult to get out. But what I do is just kind of start putting it together here. I'll just kind of eyeball it and get it in the center there, and then go ahead and start sliding the rail on here. Now I cut them kind of tight, so I want them to fit on there nice and tight too. Just like that. Okay. Now what you can do, I don't use a whole lot of glue because I'm going to use a pin nailer after this and nail through all those tenons. So what I do is I just kind of get a little glue in there, not a whole lot. I don't want to have a whole bunch of squeeze out. I just get enough in there, and you're only gluing the tenons. You're not gluing the panel in there. You want everything to be able to move. Then you can put some in the top here. Just a dab. That's all you'll need here. Okay. Like that, there. Okay. And then you just kind of go around and start tapping these things in, getting these joints nice and tight. What I basically do is keep rotating it, just like this. Get everything lined up and in there the way you want it, and then we're going to shoot a couple nails in it. The last thing I do here, I forgot to mention, was once you've got the dab of glue in each corner here, you get it together and snugged up. What I do is use a couple of clamps here and just snug it up. I mean, at this point of your cabinet build, if you're making all the cabinets, you know, you've built the boxes, you've built their frames, you've built the shelves, you've built these door frames and the panels. The last thing you want to do is go halfway with putting these doors together and mess something up. So I just snug them up so they're good and tight there. Then on the back side of the door, which this is the back facing up because it's got this bevel on it, I take a little headless 23 gauge pin nailer and just shoot 2 pins where the rail and stile meet in each one. So this will just lock it through the tenon so it won't have any separation issues later on in its life. So I'll go ahead and do that. These are 1/2 inch headless pins, by the way. And so once it's all pinned up, you're set. You just got to sand these down so they're flush, and then paint them. You'll prime them and paint them. If you've got any questions, I'm pretty good about answering them. You can put them in the comments box or email me. I'd encourage you to check out some of my other videos I have. How-to videos, as well as shortly I'll have a video going up, a how-to tutorial on how to drill the holes for the Euro hinges, so you can check that one out too. I'll show you how to set up and drill those real quick. So anyway, thanks for watching.